Verapat Pariawong is a legal advisor and former special counsel to the Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, and he joins me now from Bangkok. Verapat, good to have you with us. This must come as a bit of a relief, not just for Cambodians, but for Thais in your side. How do you think these two countries reached this agreement after negotiations in Malaysia?
And I think it's certainly a very important and good news for both Thai and Cambodian citizens, especially those living on the border, and they have to run away from these terrible incidents. I think this ceasefire actually comes from the fact that the military power of Thailand clearly supersedes those in Cambodia, and it's no longer practical for Cambodia to continue the situation. At the same time, I think it's quite telling that immediately at the negotiation, there's a press conference, and we can notice that there are differences in terms of how expressions were made. The Cambodian leader made quite several remarks, whereas the Thai acting prime minister kept it very short. So it shows that there are still lots to be discussed.
Yes, so what else do you think needs to be discussed moving forward once this ceasefire comes into effect in a few hours from now?
So the immediate concern for both parties is to ensure that the ceasefire can hold. We know from conflicts around the world that ceasefire, once announced, can be quite fragile. So let's hope that that's the first priority, because the key interest for both countries is to protect the lives, especially of the citizens of both countries in those areas. But the next levels of discussions will have to be the accountability. How did the situations over the past few days escalated so quickly? It has been very clear from the outset that Thailand has tried its best to avoid exercising the military option. Although it is quite clearly seen now that the military power of Thailand clearly supersedes those of Cambodia. So it's not really in the interest of Thailand to use the military option, because if it was the intention from the outset, the Thailand could have easily maneuvered further in its military operation, but that has not been the case. So the equation seems to be that, in my analysis, Cambodia realized that it has less military power, less economic power. So the only way for Cambodia to be able to try to make some progress in its goals is to bring in international involvement. And at this stage, although it appears on the surface that ASEAN or the leadership in Malaysia has successfully brokered this temporary truce, which I hope to be a permanent one, it remains to be seen whether the two countries can resume the bilateral negotiations, or the so-called JBC mechanism, the Joint Border Committee mechanism, which will allow for both parties to come to terms on how to settle their differences.
Yes. Perawat, I found it quite interesting in that press conference by remarks from the Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. He was saying that he was thanking representatives from the US and China. What role do you think that they played in this?
Well, that's certainly one thing that Cambodia hopes for, that is to try to balance the power a bit more by bringing in these other nations. Because on one hand, JBC mechanism has been used by Cambodia and Thailand for a very long time. And Cambodia realized that comparing military, economic, and political powers in the international arena, it is difficult for Cambodia to match the levels that Thailand, or the advantages that Thailand may have. So in order to bring in these other stakeholders is perhaps one way Cambodia hopes that they could somehow bring the attention and try to get more leeways into the negotiation. But that has not really been the case. Cambodia has not successfully called in international interventions. The involvement of Malaysia, ASEAN, or China, or the US is just to promote and support the peaceful dialogue between the two countries. So it can be clearly stated that now the negotiations will have to resume at the bilateral level between Thailand and Cambodia. Now, another issue is whether Thailand and Cambodia will seek to address their differences in international arena. Cambodia tries to bring a case before the ICJ. They seem to have announced publicly that they lodged some letters before the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, in The Hague in the Netherlands, but we have not really seen the court listing the case so far. So that is another area that remains to be seen.
Veerapal, let's look at the home front where you are, the domestic political side of things. Does this ceasefire necessarily ease the pressure on the Thai government, given that the suspension of Paetongtarn Shinawatra as the PM for her handling of the conflict?
There are certainly necessary conversations for both sides to have how domestic politics play into this situation. But that is perhaps less important than to ensure that the ceasefire hold. But it is indeed the case, and in my analysis, that the past few days where we have lost innocent lives, both civilians and military soldiers, it reminds us that that's why Paetongtarn Shinawatra tried her best to ensure that we don't get to this point. She tried her best to try to use her personal relationship that she once had with the Cambodian leadership to try to ensure that both sides can avoid military conflicts. So that is certainly the case, that now we have achieved ceasefire. It is now time for both sides, especially those vocal critics, to come to terms to the fact that it is in nobody's interest to flame up these political rhetorics, which could add flames to the fire, because the innocent lives lost are not those critics sitting in the capital cities.
Okay, Veerapal Phariawong, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.